we had enough support and kind of groundswell that within 9 months, as we were coming into the next budget cycle, we actually got the budget to increase the size of the team to 15. And it was the product leaders sort of giving up open roles to fund product operations. Like, it was the biggest advocacy and like proof of value that I could have gotten, was my colleagues sort of saying like, yup, your roles are more important than mine.
Hello and welcome to the Product Operations Chronicles with myself, Graham Reed, my co-host and continuing Product Ops pal, Antonia Landi. Welcome back, Antonia.
Thank you for having me once again. It's wonderful to be back.
Today we are joined by Clare Hawthorne, who is Senior Director of Engineering and Product Operations at Oscar Health, and is also a keynote speaker at the upcoming Product Ops Summit in New York, hosted by our lovely podcast partners, the Product Led Alliance. Clare, hello. So excited to have you finally on this podcast.
I know. I'm so delighted to be here. As Graham said, I work at Oscar Health Insurance. I've been here just about 4 years, and it's been a really great learning opportunity. We've grown the team, we've done experiments, we've expanded into some like non-traditional areas, and it's really informed my opinions on all of the things that product ops can do. I know that sometimes there's a question of what we can do versus what we should do, but I'm sure we'll start unpacking some of those as we get into the conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and we'll pick that up in a moment. But for everybody today, we're going to talk about future-proofing product operations, and so we're going to take a bit of a pause and take stock of where product operations is today, particularly after the incredible journey the role and those in the role have been on in the past 2 to 3 years. We're going to do a little bit of a retro, like all good Scrum people that we are, and ask ourselves some hard questions. The aim here is to help understand what comes next. So trying to future-proof a little bit against anti-patterns, traps, and unhealthy trends that we might start to find appear. And with that, I'd really love to kick off, Clare, amusingly, where we first started interacting. I know we talked about this a few times, which was with the word support. And I'd love to just hand straight over to you and unpick this a little bit, because this was an absolutely great place where we first started chatting and our differences on this.
Totally. Well, and I think that as many people in the community, I've followed, Antonia on LinkedIn for a long time, Graham on LinkedIn for a long time. I think I've posted a bunch of stuff too. But I have this trigger word, and the trigger word is support. And it's been a trigger word for me for a while, and I'll sort of unpack a little bit. Prior to my pivot into technology, I worked in HR, human resources, and, being in a back office function, there's like a lot of baggage that I have with being support and a cost center. And to me, the word always implies subordination. And what's funny is like, I know intellectually that that's not how a lot of people use the word. Like, you and I had this great back and forth, Graham, where like that wasn't your intention at all. But I often think about how it short sells the work that product operations or other enabling functions do. And so whenever I hear my team use the word support, I'm always like, no, like, what are we doing? Are we empowering? Are we providing leverage? And all of these are essentially synonyms. And occasionally I'll even catch myself doing it, but word choice is so important. And I think it's so quickly to go from support to nice to have to maybe we don't have jobs that like, this is one of the ones that I do push back on.
Again, we've almost had this conversation to death over several times now, and not to kind of downplay, because it is important, and I think it is absolutely on that terminology, and it's not the word, it's what the word implies, what it makes other people feel, what it makes our audience feel that we are, and I think as well, in particular with your team, you have quite a large team, and almost protecting them a little bit from that thought process that others will have on them. That you're not a support team. You're not there to support others. You're not there to just dump the stuff that people don't want to do onto your team, the hard stuff, the unsavory stuff, and I fundamentally agree with it. And I've actually tried kind of hard to extract myself from using that word
Yeah.
a little bit, and it actually plays into something, akin to that, which is a conversation that has rolled around for years now around the things that product ops should be doing, and the things that actually it shouldn't be doing, the things that actually we don't want to see product ops being lumbered with,
Yeah.
and fundamentally that is that first line support, that is that stuff that kind of, hey, can you just go and take this off of my hands and make it not my problem anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating
Yeah.
conversation to have.
Yeah.
Antonia, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I actually love that this is how we're starting this podcast because I've been reflecting on this quite a lot, just in my own professional career in relation to product ops and how I speak about it has changed over time. When I first got into it, it was very much a I make your life better, I make your life easier. Why wouldn't you want to have me on your team? But it was also, I think, the sort of value prop around product operations was more about collaboration. It was more about really making teams work a little bit smoother. And obviously, as I chose the freelance path and I had to start learning how to appeal to decision makers with the budget, with the wallet, right? It caused me to reevaluate how I talk about what we actually do and
Yeah.
talk about it in business critical terms, actually. And I think it really is. And I love that you push back on the term support, Claire, so much because
Yeah.
it unlocks how you think and talk about product operations as a core business function, right? It's not about enhancing what's already there, it's actually about achieving business goals, right? It's about making that strategy actually executable, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. It's so much less about process and it's
Yeah.
so much more about decision making, about reducing time to market,
Yeah.
about bringing value to the market. And even internally for me, this has been a complete shift. And I think this is also really what we're seeing,
Yeah.
right, in the product ops community as a whole. And I think this is also what our sort of continued success almost hinges on as a function.
Yeah. Well, and it was I was actually having a conversation with a senior director of engineering, and one of the things that I have done at Oscar, and I know it was a debate a few podcasts ago, but I very much have positioned my team as serving all of, at Oscar we call it tech, but all of
Yeah,
R&D, engineering,
yeah,
product design, even if they're like security and data use cases, like we're a very broad-minded product ops team. But I was talking to the senior director of engineering, and one of the other reasons that I don't love support is that it means that like we don't necessarily have a seat at the table. And the
mm,
thing that he and I were talking about was the value of the diversity of perspective that he sees having product ops in the ecosystem of his teams. Because like the engineers are going to think about one problem, the product ops person is going to think about it, the problem in a very different way. And the analogy I was coming up with was like, an engineer or a PM or a product ops person, they can do a wireframe, sure. Like push comes to shove, like anyone can do that thing. But a product designer is gonna just like think about the world in a different way.
yeah,
And yeah, there's probably a time and a place where like you have to make do without that product designer, but we all know that the product's gonna be better if you have that person on your team. I think same goes for product operations. Our mindset is constantly in run state, scalability. A junior member of my team yesterday was talking to me about they're putting a new feature in place, and she's been asking about governance because she's like, Claire, I see all these people spinning up, things, and there's going to be debt in 6 months. I'm sitting there being like, yes, like I'm glad that you're advocating for that point of view because again, it's that like diverse perspectives. We're all going to build better software if we have multiple lenses on it.
absolutely.
I think the whole seat at the table is just such an important point. And Antonia, loving what you were saying there about kind of your journey, your mindset journey, and how that's kind of shifted. One of the things I'd actually be really interested to just dive into a little bit, Antonia, there is, do you think, and this is certainly not a loaded question at all, but do you think that your perspective is slightly different because of the role that you do in kind of that freelance world? I'm absolutely not suggesting for a second that it's not right that a product op should be focusing on that value to deliver and cycle time and things like that, but do you think that that's because the role that you're doing is now at that much higher level, that influencing to that organisational change at the higher level, whereas others that may be doing this role at more at a grassroots level will be more focused on more tactical elements and supporting those teams? It's just an interesting thought process that I just had.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think it's honestly less about tactical versus strategic, because you need the tactical in order to enable the strategic, right? Who does what at the end of the day, of course, is variable. But I think it's more about sort of understanding what you are there to do as a product ops person. And that is really from the most junior person on the team to your, senior director of product operations. And that is to bring better products to market. You're not there to improve processes. Like, you might do that on the way to helping teams bring better products to market, but at the end of the day, that's your end goal. And I think, of course, for me, framing it in a way that resonates with decision makers is something I need to do for my business, right? But I see this a lot with my coachees as well, who say, I want budget for an extra team member, right? But my CPO doesn't really see the value in getting that extra team member. Or I'm a head of product who wants to advocate for the establishment of a product ops function because I can't do it by myself anymore, but I need to convince the C-suite. So sure, I think I do have a slightly different lens on it because I mainly do speak to senior product folks, right? But at the end of the day, I think that is the push that we need to get to. And I had to say this to a coachee recently, and it's like, advocating for better collaboration is not going to get you budget, right? And it's sad in a way, right? That's the reality, but there are so many amazing things we do to enable a business to be more successful. That's what we need to hone in on.
I agree, and Claire, I'd love to take your perspective on this as well in a second. But I think that absolutely, I don't think that it's a different. I think it's an area that's probably not well treaded so far, actually. In terms for product operations folks, I think you're kind of leading the way a little bit on that thinking process. It is absolutely ultimately the goal that we need to achieve. I think that you have that ability to focus because of your role and what you do. You have that ability to focus in more on that. I don't think it's a different lens. I think it's just a different focus, in your approach to that. Claire, what do you think about all of this?
Yeah, no, well, and you can tell I was like on the edge of my seat waiting to get in. And I have a funny anecdote I'll share in a minute, but when prepping for this, and I know I shared the name of this book with you guys, but strongly recommend that folks in the product operations community check out the book The Goal. It's an older book. I think it's like 40, 50 years old now, often used in MBA programs. But the idea is, and it's a novel, so it's like a really quick read, but it's set in a manufacturing plant. And it talks about this thing called the theory of constraints. And essentially it's like, if you have a bottleneck, go fix that bottleneck because that's the thing that's like slowing down the whole company. And the bottleneck might be hard to see is sort of another big takeaway. And there have been extensions of this book into software. For those of you who follow me know, I'm a big fan of IT Revolution and Gene Kim that wrote a book called The Phoenix Project, which some of you might be familiar with, which was based on The Goal. So if you want to go back to like the original text, The Goal is great. But the reason that I talk about it and talk about it with my teams is that bottleneck, that thing that is slowing you down, is so situational. And like, even if I compare my context at Namely, which was a SaaS business, to my context at Oscar, which is much more B2C, and our product ops team is much more internally focused to tech, at Namely, I was doing a lot more like product enablement stuff. That's not the focus here at Oscar. And like I had to be okay and I had to figure out what those bottlenecks were. And the most extreme example, though, of sometimes you do just have to like do the execution work. At Namely, we once had an outage and it was like impacting our payroll, and it was like during like a payroll time. Like people were trying to process their payroll and they couldn't. It was down for like 6 hours. And our SRA team, God bless them, they were just like hands on keys crunching away. And I realized that it was like 12:30. No one had been fed. And so I ordered everyone pizza. And like the best thing I could do for Namely was to order lunch.
Yeah.
Now, do I order lunch? No. But like the bottleneck in that case was like I had engineers that I needed to not walk away from their desk. Like, how do I solve that problem? I order in pizza and I like just do the thing. So I think that maybe that's my mantra, like just do the thing that's gonna like help unblock that shipping of software that we all want to do. Yeah. And I guess not just shipping the right software that's built for the right use case, and all of that other stuff.
All of the good stuff, yeah.
It's I find that I mean, firstly, that's fantastic because it does resonate. I think it resonates with probably everyone in product operations that we do end up being this a go-to person in a crunch when something is like, I don't know who to turn to, and it circles back to this idea of support. And how actually we do need to get away from that term, because you can be a person that can look, I don't know how to solve this problem. I'm going to go and talk to Graham. I'm going to go and talk to Antonia. I'm going to talk to Claire, and they can help me understand this problem. That's not the same as, can you solve this problem for me? Can you just take this off my hands? I get this a lot, so where I am at Helios at the moment, we're rapidly scaling, product thinking, product operations, and there are a lot of little things that are just bumps in the road that we're trying to take care of. It's very, very tactical. I've been very tactical since I've started, because there are those so many bumps. People generally are knowing what they should be doing. People generally know how the direction of travel that we're going. But those bumps are just derailing so often. And a lot of these bumps are just coming up at very late notice. And so I'm purposefully interjecting myself and saying, what can I do? What can we do? What do you need here? Because I know that we can not only solve that, so it doesn't come back again, but also it's just unblocking them right now. And particularly as we are on this scaling journey, the impact of those bumps is so much more, is felt so much more now, because we're trying to navigate this change and this improvement. Whereas actually, if we were further down the line and we were much smoother running and things like that, then actually those bumps are so much smaller. Our suspension is better, our wheels are bigger, so we feel those little bumps a lot less. So I am being very, very much like that. What can I solve right now, today, tomorrow? And I didn't plan it, but I just want to be there and to support those teams to continue to achieve their outcomes.
Well, and I think that one of the things that separates like good or okay product ops from great product ops is like having the understanding and intuition of, when am I going to do it just this one time because like there's a crisis and I need to go do it, like ordering the pizza. When am I going to like put a little bit of effort in to like rehab this, versus like, when am I gonna like process engineer this because like it is gonna come around again and I need to make sure that like this bump just doesn't bother us anymore. And like those three things take different levels of investment. And I think that something that I've seen, as patterns with, we have a fairly junior team in some aspects. Sometimes it's really tempting to do just the one-off and then keep saying yes to doing the one-off. And that's how we get into the support. Like, you're always ordering the pizza. Yeah. But it can be hard, especially in those second two buckets. Like, you could do like a little bit of investment, or you can like really refactor. And I think like almost like mid-level product ops people, they always want to refactor the process and like they want to like redesign the whole thing and like, you know, figure it out. You know, you have 4 clients, they want to scale it to 100. Like, it's like, guys, like sometimes you just need to get to client number 6. Like, it's fine. You can figure out how to get to client 100 later. And so I think that sort of savvy in that sense is what I really see in the people who've been really successful in the product ops roles, is like just kind of having that intuition of like how much to invest to smooth out some of these bumps in the road.
Yeah, and I think like all 3 of us, I think, agree with everything that's been said so far. But Graham, when you were speaking, I find this so interesting, and I think this is a really compelling, but in some ways also really almost cruel challenge that we have in our jobs, is that we see those bumps, we see all of the bumps, and we see a way to resolve them, you know, in a way that makes sense, Claire, in a way that is like good enough, quote unquote. Yeah. But if you go to your product leader and say, listen, I've resolved these 15 bumps, that is not a compelling argument.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's what we need to get better at. I think it's not even that people are focusing on the wrong stuff. People are staying too tactical. Certainly these are things that are happening somewhere, sometimes, right? But that's not why budget is decreasing. That's not why people are losing their jobs. I think it's because we so far haven't been very good at, let's say, packaging these bumps into the end result, into the business outcome that we are actually there to facilitate.
It's interesting. I want to challenge you a little bit. We don't often do this. Please actually do. on the podcast. Actually, but I want to challenge you a little bit on that, because I think fundamentally you're right. I think you're right when you are then trying to justify yourself, which is absolutely a critical part of this, particularly when you're setting up a new role, or you've recently set up a new role, or you're pitching for this. But the end, ultimately, one of those end results of picking up those 15 bumps, solving them, is hopefully you've had a smoother journey. You've got some good feedback from the people that this has helped, and hopefully then line managers. So let's just say within the product team, your product director, your CPO has gone, actually, do you know what? We've had great feedback. This has really helped us. Is there kind of that almost, indirect benefit that you have given? It's not tangible. It's not based in numbers. And this really then comes into kind of measuring what we've done. Which all of us have had a great conversation many times about how difficult it actually is to measure product operations. And we quite often have landed on, actually, a lot of this is based upon how happy are our customers, our colleagues, with what we do. So my challenge, Antonia, just to what you've said there, is I think, is there value in that, in the indirectly you've helped all these people, they've actually been able to get on with their work, they've been able to see the progress, and their feedback and the general good feeling that has been felt across the team has then kind of done that full circle back up to the business. Yes, there's got to be a lot of it, great, absolutely, and some business leaders really may not care about all of that. But is that still a benefit? Is that still a proof of some good stuff that you're doing at that very tactical level?
Yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely not discount the value that comes from doing that. I have rarely seen it get budget. I guess, like, if we're purely talking about numbers, like I want to hire 2 more people because of the bumps in the road, that has rarely worked out in my experience.
I can't disagree with that at all. Absolutely.
And I guess the data point I'd ask, so I was hired in, and I had an incredible luxury as a product ops leader where I had 6 headcount. And 2 roles were filled. I had 4 open headcount on day 1. Like, this never happens. Like, the headcount gods shone upon me. Like, it was a magical experience for sure. But through what you're talking about, Graham, we had enough support and kind of groundswell that within 9 months, as we were coming into the next budget cycle, I actually got the budget to increase the size of the team to 15. And it was the product leaders sort of giving up open roles to fund product operations. Like, it was the biggest advocacy and like proof of value that I could have gotten was my colleagues sort of saying like, "Yup, your roles are more important than mine." But I do think that it only gets you so far. And to me, some of this comes back to the incredible benefits and drawbacks of being a Swiss Army knife function. Like we at Oscar, like I have a blog post on our Medium blog that says like the Swiss Army knife function of product operations. Like I do see it as a big part of our success. And I think it helped us build trust with stakeholders. I think it allowed us to meet teams where they were. I think it allowed us to not be the sort of ivory tower, like pushing stuff down that didn't apply to people. But that said, it meant that like we don't have the one metric to rule them all. And I'd be curious if you guys have actually seen this anywhere. My hypothesis, and I think I'm getting like closer and closer to like the engineering ops sort of side of things. I want to run an experiment where we like tie product operations value to like traditional Accelerate or Dora metrics. Like I have a hunch that pre-product ops, post-product ops, all of those sort of like velocity incident stuff, they're going to improve. And so like, I don't know if anyone's run the A/B case, like please like send me the article if you have, but like, are there other ways that we can try to measure some of this, what otherwise would be vibes? And at Oscar, for a variety of reasons, we don't have like velocity metrics sort of at the ready, so we haven't been able to do this experiment. But like, man, like I think it might be there, and we just like haven't dug in that corner yet. But I don't know.
I love that. I love everything about that. I also strongly believe that product ops is there to support the product organization, not just product managers, right? And I think that's really interesting because I think I started in product ops saying, oh, well, it's very hard to measure. And I'm like, well, you can have like quarterly surveys to check vibes, right? And see if vibes are going up or down. And then I started measuring at the initiative level, which in some ways you can do fairly well, but you're talking about output essentially, right? If you want to increase user interviews, you're increasing user interviews. Whether they're great or not is another question. I recently have come around to the idea of measuring OKR success. Now, I know it's a little bit controversial because obviously there's a huge number of things that goes into whether a team can hit their OKRs or not, at least to, let's say, 80%. But I feel like it's an influence metric. It's not, I wouldn't say I have been successful if you've hit all of your OKRs, but if I track this over a year, right, and the percentage goes up, I truly believe we can take at least some of the credit, right, through the initiatives and through the work that we've done. And I think it's very similar to what you're proposing, Claire, right, that actually velocity goes up, right, quality goes up. Yeah.
Well, and the other one, and again, this was a hard one. Our OKR process has like gone through a lot of iterations, so that wasn't stable enough for me to like anchor on. But I was reflecting on, vibes wise, like the context that we have at Oscar on our tech team is very different from when I joined 4 years ago. And I was trying to think about some of the things like what has changed. And one of them that I came up with was up through probably like mid 2023, every like 5-6 months, there would be that meeting, and I'm going to describe the meeting that we've all been in, where it's like all the leaders get into the room, and it's like, we have this new thing, how are we going to make it fit? And like, we just like had them, and like, and everyone had to like go back to their teams and figure it out.
Right.
And we haven't had one in a long time, and I was trying to think about why. And the biggest difference was we had established universal road mapping process. Was it perfect?
Yeah.
No. But it did mean that like, and when we started this process, it was, oh my God, you have 3 days, go fill out this Google Sheet with all the things your team is working on and tell us what you think we can deprioritize. There was a version where it was like, okay, pull up the unified roadmap and let's go through it together. And then we haven't had to have that meeting in 6 months.
Yeah.
18 months. Like it's been 6 quarters since we've had to have that meeting. And I think it's just because we're better at like predicting work. And so again, it's like, it's a little bit vibesy, but 6 quarters without having to have a big deprioritization exercise, like, to me, I'm going to take some credit for that.
That's lovely. I love that.
Oh.
It's there's a couple of pieces I just want to pick up on from both of you. I mean, and for anybody watching, I think none of us would disagree that it's not straightforward to measure, in any way, shape, or form, compared to more traditional roles around a business where it is so easy to have numbers against it, and ultimately measurement always comes with some sort of numbers with it. I genuinely love, Antonia, the idea that measuring other people's successes and what influence did we have on that. I think that's absolutely great. The one difficulty that I've always had in my mind with that, and that's not to say that it's right or wrong, is measuring that where everything else is then unchanged. For example, velocity of the engineers, the engineering teams. If they don't change, if we don't have any new people start, we haven't organised the teams, things like that. Great, we should be able to kind of measure that, but actually how much it then gets attributed, even vibey wise, to what you have done versus the other changes and improvements that other teams have made. And that's where I've always then mentally had just a difficulty in kind of like trying to then physically measure that. It's not to say that it's right or wrong at all. It's that's just where my mind always then just stops working, if I'm perfectly honest with you. But it just comes back to this vibey idea, and what does that actually then mean, and does that mean different things to different leaders? Some leaders will be, hey, look, I've really noticed an uptick in the vibe. People are happier. They're having to do less stuff. I'll give you an example. So one of the things that we've done at Helios recently is we've really doubled down on sprint reporting, getting this information up and out about what work is being done, how well are we doing. A lot of focus on predictability of what we are doing to help us build more trust within the business, and purely because of the technology I had to hand. A lot of this was a lot of manual reporting and entry by the teams. They hated it. It took them a long time. I didn't like it anyway. I've now taken on board, hey, I'll do an export out of Jira, puts it all into Airtable for us and away. And all of a sudden, all the product managers are telling me, they're going, this has saved us so much time, but we are also getting the stats that we knew that we wanted anyway. And they're like, this is huge. This is massive for me. And that has been felt across the supporting teams around them, the rest of the squads, and also up to leadership as well. And that's then come back to me as a piece of feedback. Fantastic, this has happened. So the vibe is an important piece that's around that. That is absolutely in the business, and I think different leaders will appreciate that or not. And so I think that's also a variable in this: is do leaders care about so much? And whether they admit it or not, the vibe, how happy their staff are, how efficient, if even intangibly, their staff actually are, versus others that are just like, but that's all lovely, whether they work hard or not, are they still earning me the income? And that's all I care about. And I think that's a factor in all of this as well.
Yeah, I think I'd like to. So I'm not saying that leaders don't care per definition about how their people feel. I think that's honestly just 100%, 99% untrue. They do. But I think this really goes into this theory of managing up, right? And something we hear all of the time when it comes to managing up is make your manager successful, right? The CPO going to the board saying, look, our people are so happy. We've not had any attrition. It's like, cool. And, right? It's a yes and. It's not that is discounted 100% across the board. It's just that in itself, like you say, if nothing else changes, is not enough.
Fair. Yeah, absolutely fair.
And I think it underscores the importance of knowing what's important to your business, to your leaders. Like I'm sitting in a conference room at Oscar, like our number one goal for 2025 is growth. Mm-hmm. It was not our number one goal last year. And my team needs to understand how the pivot towards growth impacts the work that they're doing. And like maybe that means that the efficiency project, while still important and valuable, sort of comes lower down on the stack rank than the, enabling a new integration. Like I think having that business sense of like what's important, not just for you, but like to the broader business context. And I love Antonia, like think about what is going to get layered up to the board, if anything. Like, I think that there are a lot of folks in product operations that are like, oh my God, the board might talk about some of my outcomes. Like, yes, they should. If we're doing our job right. And we've had a really big push in 2024 to have people articulate outcomes. And this was sort of my compromise on the Swiss Army knife challenge is like, okay, I know that one metric is not going to make sense because we're so bespoke. So let's just get really good about talking about outcomes. And so the whole team, and you can imagine there were some people who were good like right off the bat, other folks that like needed some coaching. But now I think everybody has that mindset of, okay, what outcome am I working towards? Because output is not enough. Like you need to get to what is this actually giving to Oscar, to the business, to the team.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. Moving the conversation forward a little bit. Because I'm genuinely loving how we have very naturally, without any effort at all, we've landed on, what does the future look like here? How have we gone from where we used to be, to where we are now, to where we are going to be? What are the directions? And absolutely through these conversations and opinions, what are some potential traps and pitfalls that we are either or could fall into? I think that's great. What does the future look like from here, though? Go on.
Yeah. I'm going to tease a little bit the talk that I'm giving in a couple weeks. I'm still working on my slides. I'm sorry, PLA, that I'm late. But
This is an absolutely fantastic opportunity just to re-emphasize, you are speaking, and please do to go into a little bit of detail this, but you are speaking at the Product-Led Alliance Product Operations Summit in New York, March the something. I've got the date in front of me. So, a little bit of advertising there for anybody watching. But Claire, do just tell us a little bit about the talk that you're giving.
Yeah, well, and I have two somewhat related hypotheses that I would love folks to like think about applying in their role. And I know that like I have a very specific product ops point of view that not everyone else agrees with. So like this comes with a tiny bit of a caveat. I believe that one of the ways that product operations can continue to thrive and grow and deliver more of that impact is to be expansive in terms of who are our customers and thinking about engineering beyond just product. And the talk that I'm giving at PLA is called the Unexpected DevOps Champion. And essentially, like, for those of you who know DevOps, there is this reputation that it means like cloud migration and like Kubernetes clusters. Like, if you actually read the text, product operations is DevOps. Like, we do the thing. And so I'm trying to like, sort of break down some of the barriers and maybe some of the mental hurdles and give people the language that they can use to talk to their engineering leaders about what they do. Because I think that there's a there. And I think, even if it's just having that wider stakeholder portfolio of the people who think you're delivering value, like that's a huge way that we've been successful at Oscar. I also think, though, and some of this is like strategic, playing into the zeitgeist, I think that product operations is pretty uniquely positioned to enable AI use cases throughout tech organizations. I think that we are often at the center of, frankly, processes that are more manual than they need to be. We need to figure out the best ways to not just use AI tools ourselves, but advocate for getting AI tools and AI use cases into the product, and also figuring out how to scale the AI impact across an organization. Like, you as a product ops person might be well equipped to help train a customer success team on how they can use AI. And like that has this like huge ripple effect across your company. And Antonia, like, can you imagine like going to the board and being like, So this product operations team over there, they figured out how to like train a 300-person company on Gen AI use cases, and like here's some of the things that have come out. Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be an awesome success story? And I think that we have all of the tools at our disposal. We know how to enable people. We know how to think about process. We're pretty technical. Like, I think that we have this like secret sauce. And a member of my team, Sophia, ran a workshop internally, which is sort of how I have this conviction. We're working on a blog post that she's going to try to publish to give people a little bit of a playbook of like how to think about this. But you know, I have a feeling that even just by saying it out loud, there are some folks that are like, oh yeah, like I know how to run with this idea. So those are kind of the two areas that I think we can lean into to kind of future-proof our role.
I love that. Absolutely. I think it's so powerful. And it's funny because I think we've kind of come to the same conclusion, maybe with slightly different lenses. To me, honestly, the future of product ops. And this is what I've seen from the market, right? Based on inbound client requests. It's always been data this past year.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been we are sitting on a mountain of data and we're just not doing much with it, right? Mm-hmm. So really actually making that link between product organization and data teams, breaking down those barriers, right? Reducing the silos, empowering product folks to dig deep by having also data analytics tools that don't suck, that aren't, you know, hidden behind 50 million filters with a really complicated UX. All of that, like making data lived and breathed every single day and actually using it to guide decision making. And I think Gen AI, again, in here, I mean, we're already seeing it with some of the analytics tools implementing like your own AI analyst, right? That idea. And it's right, it's not to replace analysts, obviously, but it's really just to empower people using plain language to really dig deep into the insights that organizations are so often already sitting on, and they're just not using it.
I love that one, Antonia.
Yeah, I think that's it plays into kind of slightly wider as well. Is how are we? And a term I've found myself using a lot over the last two or 3 weeks, which is how do we continue to allow or enable our teams, and not just in product but across the business, them to do their primary task, the primary reason why they work at your business, at our business, you know, and when you break it right down, I think I've said this a couple of times on the podcast before, when you break it down, why do people work in a certain role? What do sales do? Fundamentally, they're there to sell the product. What do marketing do? They're predominantly there to make sure that people are seeing the product and getting the best message about it. Why are engineers here? Fundamentally, write lines of code. So what are we doing to break down both the silos in terms of that communication between all of them, making sure they've got access to the right data to make their decisions? Ultimately, all of these things are superfluous to their primary role at the business. How do we make sure that they're doing that primary role, which ultimately then means there should be as getting the most value out of them and bringing the most value back into the business. That's always been where I've seen product ops, and that's why Claire, like you said earlier as well, product ops is not just about the product teams, it's across the whole tech side of the business. Actually, I think it goes across the entire business to a big part as well. And how are we supporting, forgive the term, supporting them to be as efficient in doing that primary role as possible. I don't think that's going to change. I think that's only going to increase. And absolutely, how can we then leverage the right tools, whether it be AI or not, to just help them do that?
Mm-hmm. And help them do it in a repeatable, scalable way that doesn't create debt in the long term.
Yeah.
And again, I think that that's where one of my taglines, I get out of bed in the morning thinking about run state. And I do think that that is a big differentiator between me and other leaders on the technology team. Like, other leaders on the technology team are often thinking about launch day. Like, everybody in product operations, we think about launch day too, but like, we're worried about like the critical care period and the whatever else, or like, we're spinning up this new Gen AI tool. How are we going to make sure that we don't blow the budget and like use too many tokens? Or how do we make sure that like we're using it for the right use case? So I think that making sure that we are enabling all of these other groups, and I think with a lens of kind of long term, like total cost of ownership, maybe is a good word of thinking about it. But like, how do we have just the right level of governance that's not stopping experimentation, that's not stopping growth, but is also making sure that the organization, at least to the degree we can control it, isn't writing checks that we'll have trouble cashing later.
Yeah, so interesting. I feel like for me, product ops has always been about empowering people to do their best work, right? Like that's really like distilled into like half a sentence. I feel like that's what product ops is to me. And that goes across functions, across departments. It goes across hierarchies, right?
Yeah.
I want to empower my CPO to be the best CPO for that company, right? Just as much as I want to empower a junior designer who just joined, right? Figuring out how to become part of the team.
Yeah, I love that.
I think that's a fantastic point for us to kind of now, start to close on a little bit. I'd love to just come to both of you and for a final thought of where do you feel that the trajectory that Product Ops has been on, in earnest in the last 2 or 3 years since the role and the great Product Ops community that we are all a part of, has really come together, really helped shape this role and this function. Is it on the right trajectory, or actually is there anything that you feel that significantly we're heading in a direction that we need to pivot on?
I feel more sort of confident and positive about it now than I have done in some years back, to be honest. I think there was a little bit in the middle where all the layoffs were happening. Suddenly, like, it was really support and nice to have, and we can do it ourselves. But I think we kind of had to go through that as a discipline to get back to basics and really hone in on the value we are delivering. And I think people are being more and more outspoken about that, obviously with yourselves as well, right, being a big part of that push. So I love to see it, and I also love contributing to that, and I do think we're heading in a good direction. Yeah
I think that I'm with Antonia. I'm very bullish on the future. I think the potential pitfall, I think Graham, you had mentioned that at one point, is that we fall back on bad habits. Like it is so easy, especially like being an enabling role, that turns into not just support but like people pleasing, and like that slippery slope does like give me anxiety sometimes. And I think again, at all levels, at all tenures, like, and to be a junior person in product operations, and actually, kind of at all levels, you're often facing off against stakeholders that are much more senior and frankly more powerful than you are. And so it's so easy to like kind of like stop advocating for the things that product ops does best. And so I think as long as we can continue to from the sort of community layer, empowering people to have that talk track, to know what to say in those situations, I think we can avoid it. But that's like one of the things that keeps me up at night a little bit is, are we going to backslide and go back to what Antonia was talking about of like sort of a nice to have, like vitamin instead of painkiller kind of reputation.
Yeah. It's a great soundbite to end on. Absolutely. I mean, I think we could talk forever about like those bad habits and things like that. And Antonio, I think, as you mentioned, it has been a challenging 18 months, 2 years prior to where we are now. Not for the whole tech industry, and Product Ops was obviously had its time within that. I'm going to end there now, particularly because I think all of us, as we're recording this today, we all have hard stops for various different reasons. But I want to thank my co-host, firstly, Antonia, for our very special guest today, Claire. Thank you so much for joining us today. Absolutely brilliant sets of conversations. Please do connect with all of us on LinkedIn. Thank you as ever to the Product Led Alliance for facilitating this ongoing series. Thank you all for watching as well, and look forward to welcoming you on the next episode of the Product Operations Chronicles. Thanks, everybody.